The 1970 Queen's Birthday Honours were appointments to orders and decorations of the Commonwealth realms to reward and highlight citizens' good works on the occasion of the official birthday of Queen Elizabeth II. They were announced in supplements to the London Gazette of 5 June 1970. At this time, honours for Australians were awarded both in the United Kingdom honours on the advice of the premiers of Australian states, and also in a separate Australia honours list. Recipients of honours are displayed here as they were styled before the new honours. United Kingdom: Life Peer Baron Cyril Hamnet, for services to the cooperative movement. Sir Lawrence Kerr Olivier, for services to the theatre. Sir Max Leonard Rosenheim, K.B.E.M.D.F., RCP, President, Royal College of Physicians. The Right Honourable Lord Wheatley, for public services in Scotland. Privy Councillor the Right Honourable William Aaron Hughes, C.B.E.D.L., Minister of State, Scottish Office. John Morris, Minister of Defence for Equipment. Knight Bachelor Charles Frederick James Barker, M.B.E. for services to the food industry and to export. Leonard Frederick Behrens, C.B.E. for public services. Professor George Edward Gordon Catlin, for services to Anglo-American relations. William Alexander Roy Collins, C.B.E., Chairman and Managing Director, William Collins Sons and Company Limited, for services to export. Samuel Crowe Curran, D.L., for services to technology and education. Frank Fraser Darling, Vice President, Conservation Foundation. Arthur Eric Courtney Drake, C.B.E., Chairman, British Petroleum Company Limited. St John de Holt Elstub, C.B.E., Managing Director, Imperial Metal Industries Limited, for public services and services to export. Charles Forte, Chairman, Forte Holdings Limited. Ralph Freeman, C.V.O., C.B.E., Senior Partner, Freeman, Fox & Partners, Consulting Engineers. William George Gillies, C.B.E., for services to art. Professor Harry Godwin, for services to ecology and botany. Morris Frederick Hackett, O.B.E., Chairman, South East Region Economic Planning Council and Chairman, North West Metropolitan Regional Hospital Board. Charles Edgar Matthews Hardy, C.B.E., Chairman, British Overseas Airways Corporation. Julian Stephen Alfred Hodge, Chairman, Hodge Group Limited. Thomas Norman Arthur Jeff Coate, F. RCS, RC, OG, Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology, University of Liverpool. Ronald Ernest Charles Johnson, C.B., Secretary, Scottish Home and Health Department. Francis Avery Jones, C.B.E.F., RCP, M. RCS, Physician, Department of Gastroenterology, Central Middlesex Hospital. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Gordon Larking, C.B.E., for services to the British Legion. Ronald George Leach, C.B.E., Senior Partner, Pete Marwood, Mitchell and Company. John Lawrence Longland, for public services. John McWilliam, for services to local government in Fife. David Christian Martin, C.B.E., Executive Secretary, The Royal Society. Robert Frederick Payne, President, The Law Society. Norman Robert Reed, Director, Tate Gallery. Norman Andrew Forster Rantry, Director, Water Resources Board. Edward Walters Sr., C.M.G., Chairman, Ransom, Hoffman, Pollard Limited, for services to export. Arnold Weinstock, Managing Director, General Electric and English Electric Companies Limited, for services to export. Charles Henry Trelease Williams, C.B.E., Chairman, Iron and Steel Industry Training Board. John Alexander Willison, O.B.E.Q., P.M.D.L., Chief Constable, West Mercia Constabulary. Kenneth Millswood, Chairman, Concrete Limited, for services to export. Isidore Victor Elian, lately Chief Justice, Swaziland. John Michael Parsons, for services to British commercial interests in India. The Honourable Edward Trenton Richards, C.B.E. for public services in Bermuda. Dermot Joseph Sheridan, C.M.G., Chief Justice, Uganda. Major William Thompson, O.B.E. J.P., for public services in Gibraltar. Australian State of New South Wales. The Honourable Mr Justice Bernard Sugerman, Q.C., President of the Court of Appeal. Elton Reginald Griffin, C.B.E. for services to industry and commerce. Robert Wentworth Norman, for services to banking and the community. State of Victoria. The Honourable Murray Victor Porter, Agent General for Victoria in London. Major General Robert Joseph Henry Risson, C.B.E.D., SOED, for distinguished services to the community. State of South Australia. The Honourable Mr Justice Reginald Rodrigues St Clair Chamberlain, Q.C., Senior Queen Judge, Supreme Court of South Australia. State of Western Australia. Thomas Edward Jewell Wardle, Lord Mayor of the City of Perth, for services to commerce and the community. State of Tasmania. Alan Walton Knight, C.M.G., Chief Commissioner, Hydroelectric Commission of Tasmania. Order of the Bath. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath. Admiral Sir Peter John Hill Norton, K.C.B. General Sir Richard Michael Power Carver, K.C.B. C.B.E.D. S.O.M.C.A. D.C. Late Royal Armoured Corps. Colonel Commandant Royal Tank Regiment. Colonel Commandant Corps of Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Air Chief Marshal Sir Brian Kenyon Burnett, K.C.B.D. F.C.A. F.C.A. D.C. Royal Air Force. Sir Philip Allen, K.C.B. Permanent Under Secretary of State, Home Office. Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath. Vice Admiral Peter Maxwell Compton, C.B. Lieutenant General Peter William Craddock Hellings, C.B.D. S.C.M. C. Lieutenant General Sir Basil Oscar Paul Eugster, K.C.V.O. C.B. C.B.E.D. S.O.M.C. Late Foot Guards, Colonel Irish Guards. Lieutenant General John Aubrey Taylor Sharp, C.B.M. C. Late Royal Regiment of Artillery, Colonel Commandant Royal Regiment of Artillery. Air Marshal John Barry Clough, C.B. C.B.E.D. F.C.A. F.C. Royal Air Force. Sir William Richard Joseph Cook, C.B. Chief Advisor, Ministry of Defence. Philip Rogers, C.B. C.M.G. Second Permanent Secretary, Civil Service Department. Companion of the Order of the Bath, Military Division Surgeon Rear Admiral William Ivan Norman Forrest, Q.H.D.S.L. D.S.R. C.S. Major General Ian Stewart Harrison. Rear Admiral Ian Wyndham Jameson, D.Sc. Rear Admiral Ian Stewart McIntosh, D.S.O.M. B.E.D. Sc. The Venerable Archdeacon Ambrose Walter Marcus Weeks, Q.H.C.A. K.C. Major General Anthony Patrick Willesey Willsey M.B.E.M. C. Major General Francis James Cecil Bowes Leon, O.B.E.M.C. Late Foot Guards. Major General Edward Michael Hall, M.B.E. Late Corps of Royal Engineers. Major General Roy Stewart Marshall, O.B.E.M.C. M.M. Late Royal Regiment of Artillery. Major General Morris David Price, O.B.E. Late Royal Corps of Signals. Colonel Commandant Royal Corps of Signals. Major General Charles William Woods, M.B.E.M.C. Late Corps of Royal Engineers. Air Vice Marshal Cecil Howard Beamish, Q.H.D.S.F. D.S. R.C.S. Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Geoffrey Percy Sansom Thomas, O.B.E. Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Ruthven Lowry Wade, D.F.C. Royal Air Force. Air Commodore John Lawrence Weems Ellacombe, D.F.C. Royal Air Force. Civil Division Arthur Hugh Chaplin, Principal Keeper of Printed Books, British Museum. Thomas Alfred Graham Charlton, Assistant Under Secretary of State, Ministry of Defence. Edward Victor Dennis Glazier, Director, Royal Radar Establishment, Ministry of Technology. Charles Addison Somerville Snowden Gordon, Principal Clerk, Table Office, House of Commons. Bernard Gottlieb, Under Secretary, Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications. Douglas Owen Henley, 3rd Secretary, HM Treasury. John Arthur Hudson, Deputy Under Secretary of State, Department of Education and Science. Fred Matthias Kearns, M.C., Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. William Allen Cunningham Matheson, C.M.G., M.B.E., Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Overseas Development. George Irvin Mitchell, Legal Secretary, Lord Advocate's Department. John Lawrence Paisley, M.B.E., Chief Highway Engineer, Ministry of Transport. Theodore Burton Fox Ruath, C.B.E., Chief Land Registrar. James John Sutherland Shaw, Deputy Secretary, Civil Service Department. Charles Edward Gordon Smith, M.D., M.R.C.P., Director, Microbiological Research Establishment, Ministry of Defence. James Alexander Young, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture for Northern Ireland. Order of St. Michael and St. George, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Sir Bernard Alexander Brocas Burrows, K.C.M.G., Permanent United Kingdom Representative on the North Atlantic Council, Brussels. Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Sir Kenneth George Grubb, C.M.G., for services to the Church of England. Peter Alex Wilkinson, C.M.G., D.S.O.O., B.E.H.M. Ambassador-designate, Vienna. Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George William Lewis Bell, M.B.E., Head of the British Development Division in the Caribbean, Ministry of Overseas Development. Professor Cecil Terence Ingill, for services to higher education overseas. George Russell Lee, Acting Assistant Director, Ministry of Defence. William Stavold Carter, C.V.O., lately Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Donald MacDonald Gordon, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Donald Frederick Hawley, M.B.E., Consul at H.M. Embassy, Baghdad. John Mackenzie, M.B.E., Deputy British High Commissioner, Calcutta. Kenneth Edward Mackenzie, lately Consul at H.M. Embassy, Stockholm. Kenneth Charles Parsons, O.B.E., Foreign and Commonwealth Office. The Honourable Richard John McMorran Wilson, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Australian States, State of New South Wales, Albert Oliver, Under Secretary and Controller of Accounts, New South Wales Treasury. State of Victoria Robert John Southey, President of the Liberal Party of Victoria. State of Queensland Lawrence John Hartley Teakle, for distinguished services to university education and administration. State of South Australia Ernest Melville Schroeder, for distinguished service to industry and the state. Royal Victorian Order, Knight Commander of the Royal Victorian Order Air Vice Marshal Alan Hunter Kashmir Boxer, CBD, SOD, FC Alan John Bridson Goldsmith, C.V.O.M.B.B. S. Lord Adam Granville Gordon, C.V.O.M. B.E. Sir David Lumsden Webster, F.R.C. M. Commander of the Royal Victorian Order the Most Honourable Patricia Marchioness of Abergavenny. Mark Baring, Colonel Sir Thomas Pierce Butler, B.T. D. S.O.O. B.E. Colonel Donald Hamish Cameron of Lochiel, T. D. J. P. Roger Thomas Baldwin Fulford. Roy Frederick Lloyd, C. B.E.M. via the Honourable Mary Ann Morrison. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Ferguson George Donaldson Smith, D.F.C. Metropolitan Police. Walter John George Verco, M.V.O., member of the Royal Victorian Order. At this time the two lowest classes of the Royal Victorian Order were Member and Member, both with post-nominals M.V.O. Member was renamed Lieutenant from the 1985 New Year Honours onwards. Fourth Class Commander Brian Colin Gallagher, Royal Navy. Captain Richard Leoline Jenkins, Queen's Dragoon Guards. Stanley William Lionel Rivers Lacking, M.V.O. Lawrence Ernest Nicholson. John O'Connor. Commander Peter Maxwell Stanford, Royal Navy. Chief Superintendent Herbert John Snowley, Thames Valley Constabulary. Thomas Hunter Thompson. 5th Class Francis William Collins, Reginald Charles Fisher, Sidney James Mooney, Royal Victorian Medal Thomas Aspton, John Birchenow, Leonard Waltercuff, Chief Writer Richard Saxon French, Frank Gannon, George Grant, Miss Susan Jones, Reginald Anthony McSweeney, Sergeant Terence Ogden, Royal Air Force. Miss Emily Edith Oliver, Yeoman Bedgoer Joseph Patterson, Her Majesty's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard. Police Constable Duncan McCarter-Scott, Metropolitan Police. George Thomas Frederick Smith, Robert Henry White, Order of the British Empire, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the British Empire Sir Ian Frank Bowater, D.S.O.T.D., Lord Mayor of London. Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire Miss Dorothy Elizabeth Ackroyd, Director, Consumer Council. Margaret Isabel, Mrs. Cole, O.B.E. for services to local government and education. Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire, the Right Honourable Randall John Somerled, Earl of Antrim, D.L., Chairman, the National Trust. Sir Charles Desmarais Newbold, C.M.G., Q.C., lately President, Court of Appeal for East Africa. Australian States, State of Queensland the Honourable Mr. Justice Joseph Aloysius Sheehy, lately Senior Queen Judge, Supreme Court of Queensland. Order of the Companions of Honour of Sir Frederick William Mallandane Ashton, C.B.E. for services to the ballet. Dame Sybil Thorndike, D.B.E. for services to the theatre. New Zealand. Knight Bachelor the Honourable Roy Emile Jack, for outstanding services as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Dove Mayor Robinson, for outstanding services as Mayor of Auckland from 1959 to 1965 and again from 1968. Order of the Bath, Companion of the Order of the Bath Military Division Air Vice Marshal William Hector Stratton CBEDFC, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Order of St. Michael and St. George, Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George the Right Honourable Keith Jacker Holyoake CH, Prime Minister. Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Samuel Lawrence Ludbrig MBCHB of Auckland, for most valuable services to paediatrics and child health. The Honourable John Kenneth McAlpine of Christchurch, for most valuable services to politics. The Honourable Arnold Henry Nordmeyer of Wellington, for most valuable services to politics. Order of the British Empire Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Alan John Danks, for outstanding services as Chairman of the University Grants Committee. Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division William Patterson Pollock Gordon MBFRCS of Stratford, for very valuable services to medicine. Bernard David Arthur Grieg of Wellington, for very valuable services as Controller and Auditor General. William Maxwell Hamilton of Wellington, for very valuable services as Director General of the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research. Geoffrey John Jearn of Wellington, for very valuable services as Chief Judge of the Maori Land Court. Military Division Major General Richard James Holden Webb MBE, Chief of General Staff. Officer of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Horace Ernest Carter, for valuable service to the community of Tauranga, especially as Chairman of the Tauranga Harbour Board. Neil Thomas Gillespie, of Lower Hutt, for valuable services to local and national bodies. John Parry James, of Hamilton, for valuable services in the field of veterinary research. Brian James Lockhaw, of Eketahuna, for valuable services to the sport of rugby football. Alan Joseph MacDonald JP, of Wellington, for valuable services as Secretary, New Zealand Labour Party. Eric Percy Salmon JP, of Auckland, for valuable services to the community and the printing industry. David Thomas Spring JP, of Palmerston North, for valuable services to the community, particularly education. Andrew Sherlaw Murray JP, of Cheviot, for valuable services to education. Hannah Ratangia-Oridi, of Ruatoria, East Coast, for valuable services to the Maori people. Neil Lockland Watson, of Invercargill, for valuable services to local government. James Busby Williams, of Gisborne, for valuable services to the community, particularly in local body affairs. Ralph Frederick Wilson, of Wellington, for valuable services as General Director of the New Zealand National Party. Herbert Jenner Wiley JP, of Auckland, for valuable services as a magistrate. Military Division Commander Peter Ronald Silk, Royal New Zealand Navy. Colonel Robertson Harvey Smith, Colonel's List. Group Captain Bertram Colin Thomas Fitzgerald MBE, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Member of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Victor James Alexander, of Hamilton, for services to the community. Mrs. Laura Catherine Ambery, of Dargaville, for services to the community. George John Wedgwood Boone, of Stratford, for services to local body affairs as Mayor of Stratford since 1957. Miss Helen Campbell, of Christchurch, for services to the nursing profession. William Arthur Gordon Craddock JP, of Westport, for services to the community, particularly in the field of sports administration. A Reverend Murray Holman Feist, of Auckland, for services as Secretary for New Zealand of the Mission to Lepers. Richard Noel Fickling JP, of Auckland, for services to local government and to sport. Mrs. Betty Phyllis Hanson JP, of Auckland, for services to education administration. The Reverend Kingi Matutarera Ahaka, of Auckland, for services to the Anglican Maori Church. Patrick Kierans, of Taihape, for services to local affairs. Miss Mary Timpany, of Dunedin, for services to the education of deaf children. Walter James Ganley Parker, of Danavaka, for services to the Boy Scout movement. Henry Trevor Parry JP, of Auckland, for services to the community. David Holt Rawson Ed, of New Plymouth, for services to the community, especially in the field of mountain search and rescue. Arthur Henry Richards JP, of Napier, for services to the community, particularly to the welfare of the aged. Arthur Lawrence Richardson JP, of Taneatu, for services in local government. Robert Thomas Scott JP, of Morrinsville, for services to local body affairs. Mrs. Mayor Atami Hana, of Wellington, for services to Maori welfare. Herbert Henry Thomason MMJP, of Motueka, for services to local body affairs. Donald Alexander Thompson, of Masterton, for services to the community, particularly to cultural organizations. Arthur William Thompson, of Balclutha, for services to the community. Military Division Lieutenant Commander Reginald Samuel Hudden, Royal New Zealand Navy. Major James Richard Milton Barker, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Major Francis Edward Hopkinson, Royal Regiment of New Zealand Artillery. Warrant Officer First Class Graham Joseph Bridgehouse, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Warrant Officer First Class Andrew Gilmore McNerney, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Squadron Leader James William Crook, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Squadron Leader William Ross Donaldson, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Warrant Officer Walter Thomas Wright, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Companion of the Imperial Service Order Philip Arthur Barnes J.P. of Wellington, for valuable services as Ministerial Private Secretary. British Empire Medal Civil Division Eric Raymond Clark of Taumarunui, for services to the community and interest in the education of the Maori people. Miss Hilda Frame of Littleton, for services to the community. Richard Jeffrey Groves of Opotiki, for services as a sports coach. Frederick Arthur Haldane of Christchurch, for services in voluntary defence training. Mrs. Susanna Hoggard of Paraparaumu, for services to the community. Frederick Livingston Irving of Nelson, for services to psychiatric nursing. William Arthur Lindsay, for services as manager of the Waitangi National Trust at Paihia, Bay of Islands, since 1951. Leslie William Lewis and J.P. of New Plymouth, for services to the blind. Harold Allen Ben Pattenden of Hamilton, for services as a foreman fitter with the New Zealand Electricity Department since 1944. Walter William Sowell of Ashburton, for services as a member of the St. John Ambulance Brigade since 1940. Miss Dorothy Steele J.P. of Dunedin, for services to Corso. Floyd Davis West of Hokitika, for services as a line overseer, New Zealand Electricity Department. Military Division Chief Marine Engineering Mechanician Arthur James Thomas Curry, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Petty Officer Brian Thomas Barlow, Royal New Zealand Volunteer Reserve. Chief Petty Officer Arthur James Thomas Peacock, Royal New Zealand Navy. Staff Sergeant Bernd Ludolf Sweder Fernon van Usbeck, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Staff Sergeant Temporary Warrant Officer 2nd Class John Thomas Bennett, Royal New Zealand Engineers. Staff Sergeant Thomas Hippolyte Rangi, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Corporal P. Hopper Brown, New Zealand Special Air Service. Flight Sergeant James Halligan, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Sergeant Dennis Owen Huggard, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Part of the Air Force Cross Squadron Leader John Clark Buckmaster AFC, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Queen's Police Medal Frank Lawrence Diggle, Superintendent, New Zealand Police Force. Bernard George Waller, Senior Sergeant, New Zealand Police Force.